If you're new to plant-based nutrition and you're not sure where to start, there's all this information out there. It can be kind of overwhelming, right? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. Today we're going to cut through the fluff, debunk the common myths, tell you how much you really need to worry about protein and B12, and give you simple action steps to start following a plant-based diet. So let's start with our 6 main plant food groups. It's not as though you need everything I'm showing you here all at once, but actually it would be a pretty reasonable grocery haul for your first shopping trip. First, over here on my left-hand side, we've got our legumes, and that includes beans, lentils, peas are also in this category, garden green peas, split peas, chickpeas, and so on. I also include soy derivatives, since they're from soybeans, like tofu and tempeh in this group. We've got our tubers, like potatoes and sweet potatoes, whole grains like oats and brown rice and quinoa, barley, millet, and so on. We've got vegetables, of course, broccoli, carrot, you guys know vegetables, I don't need to talk you through them all. Avocado as a healthy fat source, dark leafy greens like kale and spinach are absolutely wonderful for you. Not to everyone's taste, of course, but brilliant for you. Fruit, banana, apple, satsumas, pear. And then finally, we've got nuts and seeds. So we've got our natural nut butter here with no added oil, pistachios, I've got some milled flaxseed here, sesame seeds, walnuts. Now what I will say is it's not as though you need each of these 6 plant food groups in every single meal you eat, but generally over the course of the day to kind of keep this mental checklist of, have I had some tubers today? Have I had some whole grains today? Have I had plenty of fruits and vegetables, some nuts and seeds today? That's a really wise way to approach this because each food group can offer different nutrients. Now, let's be honest and very realistic about this. Whole foods are frankly very boring, right? Especially if your palate is used to heavily processed, highly refined junk foods that, let's remember, have been intentionally designed to be incredibly addictive. And that's where these guys come in, because you have to make your healthy meals taste good, otherwise you're not going to stick to this process. And it's great because in time your taste buds, your gut bacteria, your habits change, and I promise you, you will genuinely start to enjoy the very natural taste of whole foods. But in the meantime, you need to be quite liberal, I find, with the way you season your food, the condiments you add, and so on. So on my left-hand side here, we've got our herbs and spices. Everything from ground ginger, cinnamon, mixed herbs, a little bit of salt, crushed chilies, and so on. Nutritional yeast is something I like, and it gives somewhat of a cheesy flavor, but is also fortified with lots of really good nutrients. My unsweetened plant milks, I tend to use almond or oat or soy milk most of all, but these are great for our cereals, for oatmeal, and so on, for a little bit of baking as well. Chopped tomatoes, I'll use these in various things from lentil marinaras, lentil dals, and so on. Tahini, I actually meant to include this in when I had that big sprawl of food groups earlier on in the nuts and seeds section. Tahini just being crushed sesame seeds, as many of you will know. So a great healthy fat source and also brilliant to use in salad dressings. A bit of stevia I'm totally okay with as a sweetener. Other sweeteners, they're all over the place here, but a drop of maple syrup from time to time, coconut sugar. Yeah, I know these are added refined sugars, but we use a touch of them to make the healthy food taste good. Cacao powder. Over here, what have we got? We've got vinegar for salad dressings. We've got more of a glaze for dressings as well. Dijon mustard, a little bit of hot sauce. This is what you need to make the healthy food taste good, as I say. Think about all the ingredients I've just shown you over the last couple of minutes here. Do you notice what wasn't there? Do you notice what was missing? Right, there was no vegan cheese, vegan chocolate, none of those mock meats, candy, soda, and so on. Why? Because I like to eat a diet primarily of whole plant food, stuff that hasn't been messed around with. Now, that's not to say that all processed foods are automatically bad. I still eat breads and cereals and pasta from time to time, but the much healthier versions at least. But it's those heavily processed, highly refined, very calorific, fat chemicals, other additives, other nasties thrown in there, that highly processed vegan junk food and lots of the, plant-based alternatives and substitutes that I like to steer away from. So now you're clear on the different plant-based food groups and some of the less healthy foods that you should be avoiding, let's start bringing all of the rules and principles that I've shared so far together and have a look at some meals, right? This is the fun part. So this is a tofu scramble that I'll often have for either breakfast or lunch. In here we've got big shock tofu, is extra firm tofu. We've got mushrooms, we've got spinach, red bell pepper, and red onion. Seasoning wise, I'll use garlic powder, salt, and nutritional yeast on this turmeric. If you're a big scrambled egg fan, turmeric you might fancy on this. I have a little bit of avocado on the side as a healthy fat source, and often I'll have a little bit of whole wheat bread with this as well. So this is a really good fast option to throw together. And I'll often use a little bit of this reduced sugar, very natural ketchup on the tofu scramble as well, just to give it something else. Next up, we've got our burrito bowl. It's on a plate, but whatever, same difference. I know some smarty pants in the comments is gonna go, it's on a plate, it's not a burrito bowl, whatever. Brown rice, although you can actually substitute here a whole wheat tortilla to make a sort of burrito. Black beans, shredded lettuce, of course. We've got our red bell pepper, a little bit of corn, a little bit of avocado, again, for those healthy fats. I might have a little bit of hot sauce sprinkled over this. This is a regular in my dinner rotations. Love this, fills me up, it's hearty. Again, if you've got some of this prepared, if you make a big batch of brown rice, you've already made your beans, or you're just using canned beans, obviously. This is quite simple to throw together, I love it. So next up, we've got our strawberry oatmeal breakfast smoothie. Sadly, I couldn't fit it all into one mason jar, so we've got our little baby portion here. This is George's. Once he's done filming and he's done a good job today, I'm going to give him a little bit of smoothie as his reward, eh? But in here we've got about 12 to 14 strawberries, 1 medium banana, half a cup of oats. If you don't have a high power blender, you'll need ground oats, but I use rolled oats. What else have we got in here? A tablespoon of flaxseed, a drop of vanilla extract, a tiny amount of maple syrup for some extra sweetness because the strawberries were not particularly good on this occasion. And that's it. And this is, again, another, it's quite a convenient option. Throw it all in the blender. This is something, if you're running out the door to work, this is something you can just take with you, obviously. There's a theme here with each of these 3 dishes. Simplicity. Some of them are slightly more elaborate and require a little bit more cooking time than others. The smoothie, for example, is really easy to throw together. But I'm not spending hours in the kitchen every single day. I'm not using really elaborate recipes that I've found in plant-based cookbooks or the type that you might find online. And if you want to do more fanciful, elaborate stuff, that's fine, that's your prerogative. I just know, after helping over 400 vegans and plant-based dieters through my coaching programs over the last half decade, I just know the value of simplicity. I know that people need very basic meal ideas and templates, otherwise they don't stay consistent for very long on the whole. Now, nutritionally, whilst all 3 of these meals are a great source of nutrients, they're relatively diverse in ingredients, and they aren't all that high in calories either, they're still not textbook perfect, as per some people's definitions. Let's start with the smoothie, for example. Antioxidants, plenty of vitamins and minerals. We've got our healthy fats from the flax seeds, the omegas, but there's no major source of protein there, for example. I could throw a protein powder in, but I haven't on this occasion. The burrito bowl, loaded with fiber. Yes, there's a couple of different types of vegetables and a healthy fat source in the avocado. Shredded lettuce, for example, I mean, it doesn't offer that much in the way of nutrition because it's largely water. And this is a dinner meal for me that doesn't contain a dark leafy green like I often have in my dinner meals, like I have here, for example, in the tofu scramble in the spinach. So it's not textbook perfect. And I want to stress here, not every meal needs to have exactly the right proportion of macronutrients, so our carbohydrates, protein, and fat. It doesn't have to have exactly the right amount, quote unquote, of fiber, nor micronutrients, so our vitamins and minerals, everything from selenium to magnesium to vitamin C and so on. You don't need all of those things present to exactly the perfect amount for a meal to be considered healthy. I think that's overly perfectionistic. Instead, what I like to do for what it's worth is aim to get a variety of nutrients, everything my body needs over the course of the day, not in every single meal, because that's a rabbit hole. When you start going down it, it never ends. You're going to get neurotic about this stuff. So with the smoothie, for example, I don't worry that it doesn't have a massive amount of protein because I know I'm going to get other great plant protein sources over the course of the day. Now, even though this video is designed for beginners, if you do happen to be at a more advanced stage with nutrition and you'd like a macro guideline to start putting your own healthy plant-based meals together, I like to aim for 60 to 65% of my calories coming from carbohydrates, 20% from protein, and 15 to 20% or so coming from fat calories. Not to sound patronizing, but if you've listened to what I just said there and you're thinking, what on earth does that all mean? It's like a different language to me. Don't worry, the meals that I've shown you today, the other meals that I show you constantly on this channel here, they generally conform to that sort of macro split. So simply by following along, simply by copy and pasting my meals, you'll generally be in that ballpark anyway. Now, to assist in getting all the nutrients you need, many health practitioners would advise supplementation. This isn't to say plant-based diets are inherently deficient. In fact, for many years, I've argued that culturally, plant-based diets being more associated with deficiencies than other nutrition approaches is absolutely laughable. It's totally ridiculous, and it doesn't seem to mirror the data. That said, I still believe in supplementation to support an otherwise very healthy diet, and this is the simple supplement stack that I like to use to make sure my body is getting everything it needs. Number one, we've got our source of vitamin B12. This is actually in the form of a multivitamin, but frankly, the reason I use it is for B12. And this is great. Just one of those a day, very straightforward, but of course check the dose on the advised dose on whichever B12 supplement you're using, obviously. Next up, we've got vegan vitamin D3, because I live in the UK and it's wintertime, so you need this bad boy, right? You need this stuff. Best with K2 as well in there. And finally, we've got our DHA/EPA omega-3 supplement from algae for our essential omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-6 is extremely easy to come by on a plant-based diet. Omega-3 slightly less so that's why I like to have this. In my mind, I consider each of these mandatory for me to supplement, because without supplementing, I wouldn't get enough of them, hence why I feel they're essential for me. Now, there is beyond this a secondary list of supplements that some plant-based dieters might wish to consider. I don't consider them compulsory, but some plant-based dieters might wish to consider. Calcium, iodine, zinc, iron, and I've already mentioned K2, so do your own research on those. Next, I want to talk to you about meal scheduling very quickly. This doesn't need to be massively different from how you're currently eating. I have my clients follow a very typical three daily meal and one snack structure, because that's how the vast majority of people like to eat, and they used to eat before they came to my program, so the transition is seamless. But frankly, what matters most of all, what matters more than when you actually sit down and eat your meals, is really just the totality of your daily diet. So I think this largely can come down to preference. What do you actually want to do? And we walked through a couple of meal ideas, didn't we, a few moments ago? But if you do want more meal ideas and inspiration, I'll link a video down below where I actually share my daily diet with you, a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner. I walk you through the whole process and the snack options I like to rotate. So check that out down below. Now, in terms of myths and misconceptions, one of the biggest myths about plant-based diets is that you won't get enough protein. I'm sure you've heard that cliche many times at this stage. Now, on one hand, if you only eat fruits and vegetables, maybe a few whole grains, and you expect to make serious gains in the gym, well, you're sadly mistaken. But does a plant-based diet have the potential to give you all the protein that your body needs and more? Well, the answer is absolutely, of course it does. Like with any nutrition approach, this question of, will I get enough protein? Well, it depends on what you eat. It depends on your version, your attempt at eating a plant-based diet. But in terms of protein-packed plant foods, there are a decent list. We've got seitan, often underrated. We've got our soy derivatives like tofu, tempeh, edamame, which, for the record, I deem as being totally safe and very healthy to use, to consume. We've got lentils and beans, we've got soy milk, we've got clean plant protein powders that exist, very relatively healthy plant protein powders that exist as well to supplement with. So there's plenty of opportunity to get a decent amount of protein on a plant-based diet. Fill your diet with lots of these things and you're not going to struggle. But that's only for those that are aiming for a particularly high protein intake anyway. There's no need to overemphasize it otherwise. 0.7 grams to 1 gram of protein per kilo of body weight per day seems to be what's advised in much of the literature, which isn't a startling amount, and it's very achievable by building lots of the foods I've just mentioned into your diet. Ironically, by the way, I forgot to mention TVP. It's the largest thing in front of me and I forgot to mention it, but that's another great source of plant protein. The other misconception that we absolutely need to cover here is that carbs make you fat. Now, admittedly, this is a fear, a concern that many people have across the diet spectrum, but I argue that it is perhaps more associated with plant-based diets, And understandably so, admittedly, because of the high carb content in many whole plant foods. Here's the thing though, carbs don't make you fat on their own. Excess calories do. In fact, some of the most effective foods for weight loss have a very high percentage of carbohydrates in them. And I've got some of the starchy staples, typical starchy staples in front of me here, but whole grains, fruits, and even vegetables are very high in carbohydrates. And these are foods with comparatively a very low calorie density, a really high fiber content, part of the reason why I deem them as being so incredible for weight loss. But they contain a lot of carbohydrates, so how does that work? How can they be really good for weight loss but high in carbohydrates? The distinction is when many people say carbs are bad, they're actually referring to highly processed junk foods, cakes, donuts, pizza, potato chips, soda, and so on. Don't get me wrong, these foods are rich in carbohydrates, but they contain loads of other things too. And to solely blame the carbohydrate content for those foods being very unhealthy, as opposed to their excessive amount of calories and all the other nasties thrown in, well, I think that's just silly. I think that's so reductive. So eating carbohydrates from clean, whole food sources, there's nothing wrong with. You can eat plenty of them. This video is already long enough and I could speak on this subject for hours and hours and hours, but I feel like we've covered all the essential fundamentals here and given you a simple enough blueprint to get started with a plant-based diet. Before we finish though, I'm just gonna hit you with a couple more quick-fire tips and hacks. Number one, most health institutions advise drinking at least 2 liters of water daily. That's about 70 fluid ounces. If anything, I think that's actually slightly on the low side for most adults, but it's a good place to start. Avoid coconut oil. It's in so many vegan foods and people are under the assumption that it's healthier than the other oils. Actually, it's incredibly high in saturated fat. It's very calorically dense. It's something I like to steer away from. Finally, remember that nutrition is just one piece of the health puzzle, albeit a very large piece, and we just talked on it extensively like we have here. But it would also, I think, be wise of me to remind you about the importance of exercise, sleep, rest, stress management, having a good social life, hydration. All of these things seem to have a really positive impact on lowering risk factors for major chronic disease and leading to a happier life. Well, that's it, my complete guide to starting a plant-based diet. Please leave any comments or follow-up questions you have down in the comment section below this video. I'll be reading all of them. Also, make sure that you've subscribed and turned on the notification bell so YouTube actually tells you when I upload my videos here. And if you want more plant-based diet and weight loss resources, you can check out the stuff at my online store. I'll put a link for